Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight I want to welcome Raymond Szymanski. He is a scientist, paranormal researcher, public speaker, and author of 50 Shades of Gray's Evidence of Extraterrestrial Visitation to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and Beyond, and Alien Shades of Gray's Victoria's Secret. He worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for nearly 40 years and retired in 2011 as a senior scientist engineer. During his decades of studying the UFO phenomenon, he encountered an excess of poorly researched and documented narrative, certain to confuse and discourage anyone interested in the topic. His mission is to present original, first-person research and documented evidence that launches others into their own quest for the truth. Raymond, welcome. How are you tonight?
Awesome. Just got off the golf course. I'm feeling refreshed, kind of energized. The endorphins are flowing. So this should be a really good conversation.
It will. I've been looking forward to this. It's going to be fun. First, I want to thank our sponsor, C60 Purple Power. I've been taking C60 for a little over 2 weeks now, and I already feel amazing. I have increased energy, better sleep, less aches and pains, and I actually feel better than I have in years. C60 may be the most powerful antioxidant yet known. Not only can it help maximize the efficiency of cells in producing energy, but it may also provide cellular protection against many toxic environmental factors. It also helps to reduce inflammation in the body by neutralizing oxidative radicals. Take back control of your health and begin your C60 Purple Power journey today. Just click the link in the description to get 10% off your order plus free shipping, or visit c60purplepower.com and use coupon code KNOWLEDGE10. And I have a quick announcement before we start. Forbidden Knowledge News Con 2020 can now be downloaded from my website as well. You can get the entire 4-day conference with 14 extraordinary speakers for only $24.99. Each day is only $6.99. Go to forbiddenknowledge.news or click the link in the description to get your copy now. All right, Raymond. Not only have you worked at Wright-Patterson, but you've done so many fascinating investigations into the paranormal and UFO phenomenon, and you've even had a few of your own unexplained experiences. And tonight, we're going to get into that. I want to start with a little bit more about your background and how you got started working at Wright-Patterson.
Good question. I was an electrical engineering student at the University of Detroit. I graduated with a BSEE in 1975. But in 1973, we had a cooperative education agreement with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So every semester, a handful of the students, usually starting out as sophomores, once you finish sophomore year, you were eligible for this work study. They call it cooperative education. So in 1973, actually, back in the fall of 72, I went to the counseling office and said, hey, what are the co-op possibilities for next year? And they said, well, there's a really interesting one that's come up. We've got 4 openings at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, I didn't know Wright-Patterson Air Force Base from, whatever. So I read up on it a little bit. He gave me a couple weeks to nosh it around. And I found out that one of the guys that I was kind of close to in the EE department, a student, was also thinking about going down there. So eventually, in January of 1973, we trundled down to Dayton, Ohio. And I can tell you, I'd never really been away from home, camps or any of that. And so here I am, college student, finished my sophomore year, and there's 4 of us driving down to Wright-Patterson to kind of give it the look over. What are we getting into? It could not have been more dreary. It's January. Well, this was late fall. And then the day we showed up, it was spritzing snow. We thought, what have we gotten ourselves into? So it was a cooperative education that got me started. When I graduated in 1975, they gave me an offer and I took it. And I just had such a great time there. And people working on great programs. I never really looked anywhere else to do anything else for the rest of my professional career.
Now, before you started at Wright-Patterson, or even in your early days, did you believe in the paranormal or ETs or even look into the phenomenon at all?
Never. Actually, the strange thing is I was interested in the space race. And every once in a while they'd say, if you look out tonight at a certain time, you'll see the space capsule. John Glenn is going to be, circling the globe or whatever. And we had a nice back porch growing up right in the city of Detroit. 2-story wood framed homes, but most of them had a nice little covered porch. So my mom would go, yeah, you can go out there and go look for the space capsule to go by. And so I always had an interest in things up there. But quite frankly, my interest in this whole paranormal thing happened that very bleak and dreary first week of January when I reported in 1973 to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I was assigned to an office, and that office had a mid-level engineer. So he was like on the general service, a GS-11. So that's right around the middle, 15 being the highest and GS-1 being the lowest. So about the first week, he said, hey, let's go to the Greasy Spoon. It was the coffee shop. And he said, I'm going to buy you a candy bar, kind of a welcoming gift. So the building that we were in was actually 2 business offices, one on the, I'm trying to get my direction, one on the south side, one on the north side, and in between was a 200-foot wide hangar that was used to house airplanes at one time. But in 1973, it was in disuse and it was empty. So it was really kind of spooky. I'm with this mid-level engineer. We're going from one business office through this 200-foot hangar. It's really dark. On the other end is the Greasy Spoon, the matching 2-story business office. So we step down this little ramp, and he turns to me and he says, have you heard about our aliens? Now I'm a co-op student from the University of Detroit. I'm a city kid, born, bred. I don't know aliens from jack. So I look at him and I say, his guy's name was Al. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, there was a crash out west in the 40s, and they brought the machines and their occupants. That's the phraseology he used. And I said, well, what for? He says, well, we have lots of engineers here, and we have a huge base hospital, and they brought them here for examination and possible exploitation. Now, his name's Jay Billis. He announces NCAA games, all college games. So when he goes to...
You were breaking up just now. Can you repeat what his name was?
Yeah, his name is Jay Billis, B-I-L-A-S, and he is one of the major announcers for college basketball. And he does this thing called the 98-foot walk. It's the length of the basketball court. And he gets a couple of the players, and he does this question and answer with them. And while they're walking the length of the court, and when they get to the other side, the interview's over. Well, this is what it was like in this dark hangar where, like, I got 200 feet before we get to the other office to ask him these questions. I'm like, aliens, what? And so I was trying to be cool, but he goes, oh yeah, and they keep them in the tunnels. Now, on my first week there, and I had no idea so I said, we've got tunnels. Oh yeah, they keep them in the tunnels. So I said, well, can we go see these aliens in the tunnels? He goes, no, we can't. Well, why not? Well, it's a secret. I'm like, Al, if it's a secret, how do you know about it? He goes, well, it's kind of a widely known secret. Everybody, is aware of this. Well, in fact, in 1973, Project Blue Book had ended in 1969 and had been there, and the predecessors, for 22 years. So it was widely known by everybody on the base that Project Blue Book was being hosted there and what they were doing. And it was always in the news, and there was television shows about that. So the connection between the base and aliens was wide known. It was no secret. So I think that's the perspective he was coming from. Not that he'd seen the aliens or he'd seen the spacecraft, but that general knowledge was there. And now he was sharing that with me. Wow. Now I'm tuned in to this whole alien Wright-Pat kind of thing. And that's where it all started for me.
Now, during your entire time there, did you personally witness any evidence of extraterrestrials, exotic materials, debris, anything like that?
There's nothing I could really put my finger on. Now, I saw a lot of strange people who could have been aliens. And after going back and thinking back, how naive I was about the whole subject. If you read Dr. David Jacobs' book, Walking Among Us, Dr. David Jacobs is one of the preeminent researchers in experiencers, in abductions. And in his last book, Walking Among Us, he documents the stories that he's been told about humans who have been conscripted by the aliens to help hybrids get integrated into our society. And I wish I'd have read a book like that back in 1973, because my observations would have been different. But when I go out to the store, or I go to, pre-COVID-19 an event, I'm looking for people who don't fit in, who socially are doing something wrong, because these are the clues you pick up from Jacob's book, how to out these people in your own mind. So now that I think back to 1973, there were some people who I thought, well, that's really awkward, but I never gave it a second thought. And I'm just wondering now, today in 2020, could that have been a clue to somebody who maybe even way back then was being integrated into society? Very strange. A great book. I think everybody ought to read it.
Definitely. What about any Men in Black type of officials that you couldn't pin a certain agency that they were with? They were just seemed, just like the Men in Black, you could say.
Oh, no, I've had encounters at Wright-Patterson. And I actually detail that in the first book, which it was at one time called 50 Shades of Grays, but it's been redesignated now as Alien Shades of Grays. The subtitle's the same, but there was some confusion there, and so I changed the whole franchise. So Alien Shades of Grays, Evidence of Extraterrestrial, Alien Shades of Grays, Victoria's Secret Truth, and then I'm working on the third book. But Men in Black. There are two 18-hole golf courses at Wright-Patterson and one 9-hole course. And on the course that's designated the Prairie Trace course, hole number 10 has a fairway that parallels the Foreign Technology Division campus. So if you start on, again, I'll get my directions, if you start on the east side of their campus and follow it all the way west, that is the same direction, and immediately adjoining that campus is hole number 10 on the golf course. Well, it actually starts with hole 9, then hole 10 picks up, so it actually is shared by two holes that are actually back to back. So holes are here, the campus is over here. So I'm now on the par 5 on hole number 10, and I'm going to snoop. I'm snooping that day, and I'm going to take some pictures of an 8-grave graveyard, which sits next to the parking lot of Foreign Technology Division. So let me set the scene for you. Foreign Technology Division is the office that ran Project Blue Book, and it is a intelligence organization whose job copies of adversaries and friends, anything that flies, take it apart and figure out how it works. So it is a full intelligence agency. So there's this 8-grave graveyard there, and I wanted to shoot some photos of it because I was going to do a story of it for my first book. And I drove there, and as I started to leave, I heard a voice, and when I looked up, it's a guy dressed as a man in black. Now this is May, and mid-May, in probably the third week of May, in Dayton, can be very warm, very humid. It was about 85 that day in the shade, and it was super warm. But this guy had on the black jacket, the black tie, the white shirt, the dark pants, and the hat. Who wears a hat like that outside when it's 85 degrees and 85% humidity? So I decide, oh my God, this guy works in that building with all those intelligence agents, and he's out here having a smoke, and he's on his phone, but he's dressed like the Men in Black. And then suddenly I'm thinking, no, my buddies set me up for this. They know I golf here, and they had to set me up. But then I thought, well, nobody knew what time I was coming out. So I couldn't resist. And I said to him, hey, I don't mean to be personal, but do you know what Men in Black are? He goes, yeah. I said, well, you're looking just like a man in black. And he starts laughing. So I said, well, look can I take a picture of you? And he said, why would I do that? And I said, well, because I'd like to put you in my upcoming book, and a picture of a man in black is going to be worth a fortune. So he points, he goes, we can't do that. I said, why not? He goes, well, in this environment, he's basically saying, I work in an intelligence agency, and I'd love to be in your book, but we can't do that. And he goes, in fact, we're not supposed to have any internet presence. So please don't do that. And I said, I'm cool. A month later, almost to the day, I have my second conversation. As I'm down the fairway, I see him there. So I cut over just to chat with him. And we have another conversation. Same Men in Black stuff, same hat. And I'm like freaking out. So I told him, I said, why are you wearing this hat? It's like 90 degrees now. So he takes off the hat, and what he wants to show me is he's bald. But it freaks me because when he takes the hat off, he's got like olive skin. It's like, it's an olive color. Now I'm really freaking. I mean, I can see he's bald, but now his skin is like, oh my God. So I made my apologies. Hey, I got to go play, thank you. And I headed off. A year later, my book gets published. Well, my book got published. That was May, June. My book gets published. I was 15. My book gets published 15. A year after that, a guy sends me a photograph of the same guy entering that building in the winter, dressed exactly as a man in black. Same guy. So here's what I got to tell you. They got to live somewhere during the day. Why not in that intelligence building? So yes, I've had 2 close encounters with that guy.
Oh, that's fascinating. Now, when it comes to the paranormal or extraterrestrial history of Wright-Patterson, would you say it's fair to start with Roswell and the debris recovered from there?
It is a known fact that whatever was recovered at Roswell was taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It's undeniable. And here's just a couple of reasons how we know that. Major Jesse Marcel was the intelligence officer from Roswell who drove out to the Foster Ranch with Mac Brazel and another intelligence officer, and they gathered all the stuff up and he brought it back. And he took it to the base. He showed it to the base commander, and the base commander authorized the public affairs official to make that announcement. We've recovered a crashed disc. Then Blanchard, Colonel Blanchard, who was in charge of the base, he was the base commander, he told Marcel, you're getting on an airplane and you're flying the material to the 8th Army Air Corps headquarters in Fort Worth. And from there, it's going to be flown to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So history said that the material was flown with Jesse Marcel to Fort Worth. It was split. One plane took a good portion of it directly to Wright-Pat. Another airplane went to Washington, D.C. because the Air Force or Army Air Corps Chief of Staff wanted to see the material. So they flew some there. Then using his own plane a few days later, he flew the remainder of it to Wright-Patterson. So the man who retrieved it out of the desert said it went there in an interview, in a taped interview. Not only that, but when it was taken to Fort Worth, there was the chief of staff who was a two-star general. And in a signed affidavit later in life, he said the material that was brought here by Jesse Marcel was flown to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So regardless of what it was, it went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That's a slam dunk. That's history.
Now, what is the likelihood of actual DNA or alien bodies being transported with that as well?
I'm a little squishy about the whole aliens went to Wright-Pat. We know for a fact that the metal that was picked up in the desert went to Wright-Pat. Irrefutable. But people like Marcel or the other intelligence officer that was there, or Mac Brazel, the guys that were first on the scene, never mention aliens. That part of the story came later. That came through Dennis, the mortician at the hospital. He said, well, I got a call from the base and said, can you get us hermetically sealed coffins for children size? So, that was kind of all secondhand. So you never got any real military first-person reports that it went there, much like you have with the material. I don't doubt that it happened, that it could have happened, because in 1947, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I believe was building 218, was the regional hospital. So it was a major hospital, had all the nurses, doctors, equipment. It had a vault in there. It had a morgue. It had an operating room. So if you wanted a secure place to take and dissect it, or just examine maybe a live one, Wright-Patterson too would have been a very logical place to bring it. But I'm a little squishy because the paperwork is the provenance is not as strong as it is for the metals.
Now, when it comes to what we're seeing in the sky as a UFO phenomenon, how much of it would you think is actually reverse engineered technology that may have been recovered and worked on since that time at Roswell?
It's not going to be flying in your neighborhood or my neighborhood. It would be flying in an area like Area 51 or any other area that has been established with that level of security. When they say the triangles in the Hudson Valley in the late 80s were our technology, I don't believe it. We do not fly top secret stuff in neighborhoods where thousands of people can see it. We don't do that. Trust me, I worked research and development for nearly 40 years. Even in the lab, when we're flying something, let's say, to take down a missile, it goes out west and they test it where nobody can see it, or hopefully nobody can see it easily and figure out what it is. So 99.999% sure that the UFOs that people are seeing are not anything that's been, reverse engineered and we're flying it out in open. We don't do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk a little bit about the paranormal history of Wright-Patterson. I know that you've experienced a couple of paranormal things, but I understand there's these ancient burial grounds near Wright-Patterson. Is that right?
That's true. The burial grounds date back to about 2000 BC. And There is a place called the Wright Memorial, and there is a little National Park Service building there. They've got some films, they've got some artifacts that are germane to the area and the history, and there's a monument there to the Wright brothers, and it's a beautiful overview. And because it overlooks the entire valley, in fact, a major part of Wright-Patterson overlooks the entire Miami Valley, the natives used that as on the plains up there, use it as a place to live because they could see the enemy coming. Plus, in times of flood, and we did have a great flood here in the early 1900s that wiped out most of the city. Great panorama. There's plenty of lakes and streams to fish down below. So at the Wright Memorial, there are 6 burial mounds right there, and that's a cluster. Then there is the largest burial mound. If you come in the back gate of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base off National Road and you drive down about 100 yards, right at the traffic light, you're going to see the largest burial mound there. And that there's proven that bones have actually, through time, been eroded, and they found human bones there. So, yes, that is the major burial site, but that dates back almost 3,000 years.
Now, can you talk about any historical paranormal cases that you might have come across or researched? I know that there was something that happened in the Arnold house. There's a few experiences that you could talk about.
Absolutely. There's the Arnold house. And then there is the base hospital that we talked about. And then there's building 1, there's building 70. So let's start with the Arnold house. Before the Arnold house was named after General Hap Arnold, who helped usher in the Air Force into the aviation age, it was a farmhouse. And a family lived there. And people lived and died there, and some of their family is buried in another burial site, which is now in the middle of the flight line, and that's yet another story. There have been stories by very sane, very sharp people, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Anyway, after the Air Force bought it, the base commanders used to live in the Arnold house, and Hap Arnold was one of those, and he lived there. So that is often used as an overflow for somebody who has a special assignment, like it's been used for the protocol office. And they're responsible for when presidents come to the base, the protocol office is energized, and they're the interface between the brass and the president. About a story there. But it's also been used for people who are lawyers. They were put in there for a while. Well, there was a female major who was in there, and she heard children. The common thing in the Arnold house are children laughing and playing and running up and down the stairs. She had several incidents of that, and finally got tired of telling people who didn't believe it, and had a friend come in there with her late one afternoon. They heard it. One of the protocol ladies, and again, when the president of the U.S. comes to the base, her office gets energized to work with these people. Her office was in there, and for 2 years, she was mostly alone, sometimes not. Well, one night, she was alone working, and there was a thunderstorm. And that started to generate a lot of activity in that house. She heard the children laughing. She heard them running up and down the stairs. She went to the bathroom. She heard them playing outside the door. So when she got back to her office, which was up on the 2nd floor, she said in a very stern voice, "Will you please stop that?" And because they didn't like her tone of voice, they started to print stuff out of the printer. It just started spitting paper. So now she said, uh-oh, where do I go next? And she said, okay, I'm not convinced it's you. You've got to give me a bigger sign. And at that moment, these huge gutters that are on that old building, one of the gutters snapped loose, came and smashed the window that she was sitting next to. Huge noise. Scared the bejesus out of her, so she went home. A week later, her coworker, one of her coworkers, had moved in with her, and she was, not the coworker, but the original lady, was sitting in there listening to the stuff going on, but didn't say anything because she wanted the new girl to identify it. So my friend is sitting there just do, not saying anything, and the new girl goes, do you hear children? I can't believe that somebody would let their children out this late. She thought they were outside playing. There's no base housing anywhere near there. If there were children out there, they'd be in trouble. So she said, do you hear those children? And my friend kept quiet. So they kept hearing the children. And afterwards, they looked at each other and goes, my friend fessed up. She goes, oh, I forgot to tell you, this is the haunted house. And so after she fessed up, she goes, can we go home now, the other girl? And they just said, they closed everything. So those are two incidents with my friend. And I actually recorded that, and she would allow me to use her name, but we'll leave her out of it for the moment.
Oh, very good. Now, you mentioned the hospital. They had some instances there. Talk about that.
Not only did they have instances, but those were written up in the base newspaper that is known as the Skywriter. And I don't know if they're available in the archives. I don't know how many years back, but I actually have taken versions when they were available. And of course, I've copied them and they're in my archives. There's two newspaper articles. In one case, the attorneys, they're in Building 10. Now, Building 10 is where the base commander is. But while their offices were being refurbished, they were put into Building 218, which was the former base hospital. And they were in a meeting room in the basement. Well, that's where the morgue was. And there were always stories about people going down there and hearing voices. Well, they had taken over the former morgue, and they put a meeting table down there with chairs, and there were several of them down there. They started to hear voices. So at the break, they went first floor, second floor, third floor, and they asked just a handful of people that were in the building at the time, did you bring a child to work today? And they go, well, we haven't seen any children. So they reconvene, they go down, they hear voices again, children laughing and running. So it's getting annoying thinking, well, if you brought your child to work, you need to control them. They go out and check on the next break. There's nobody. So there was that incident. Then there was a lady who worked up on the third floor. She was the last one out. She got down to her car. She got in, looked up at her office. Her light was on. So the next day, she asked the cleaning lady, what time did you leave? And she said, well, I left at 8 o'clock. And the friend said, did anybody else, were they up there? Nope, nobody else, the cleaning. And that was not the only case. People would close their windows for security. Windows would be open when they came back. The final thing that happened, I'm a photographer for the Air Force Marathon. So at one time, my office for a couple months was in that haunted building. I never had an event, but they moved the marathon office there, the Air Force Marathon office, and I had a lot of friends there, so I'd often visit them. And when I would get my passes to do the next shoot for the marathon, I'd go into that building and I'd do lunch, or in fact, I would take pictures of the group, and they would use those photos for the marathon office to do Christmas cards. So I'm in there, and they're telling me the latest, and what was happening is they would go out and they would step out, and the doors have these, from inside, have these breaker bars. You've seen them on all the doors. In an emergency, you just hit the bar and you're out. Well, to lock the doors, you have to have a key and a little, like a wrench. They would go outside to get some fresh air. They'd grab the door. It would be locked. Something or somebody was locking the door behind them. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's a double, I got to have a key, or a wrench and a key. So it had happened so often, and they had the locksmiths there, they couldn't solve the problem. The opposite started to happen. They'd lock it up for the night, and the next morning, the first people in would discover it unlocked, which was a security problem. So they put a sign there, please make sure the door is locked when you leave. So it was happening both ways, and nobody could ever figure that out. So it's a very, very spooky building. Very spooky.
Wow. Now, before we move on from paranormal Wright-Patterson, is there any other noteworthy stories or experiences that you'd like to talk about?
The TAPS people. They were the Atlantic Paranormal Society. You know, all those guys, they were always like, what the hell was that? You know, from the East Coast, what the hell was that? Okay, so, by the way, that's a requirement. You know, when they read people in to see who was going to be hired next, they had to say that just perfectly. Well, when TAPS was there, they found stuff in the Arnold house. And they didn't find stuff in the hospital, but they did find another paranormal activity back in building 1. Well, let me tell you this little prank before we go on. There's a docent, and she used to give tours of the haunted building of the Arnold house. Well, I had a staff of 3 young ladies who worked for me for a couple summers, and our building 10, I worked for the base commander for a couple of years. I was a direct report to him. And so across the street from the Arnold house. Well, when the docent was going to give a tour, I said, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to take my camera, and every place that the TAPS people found something paranormal, we're going to get photographs, either individually or as a group. Well, what we found out is the docent hated the idea. She would regularly give tours, but when people would ask her about the ghosts and stuff, especially after TAPS was there, she was like, shut the hell up. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to ask the questions. And when we were there for the tour, there was this TAPS poster. It had to be like 2.5 feet wide by 4 foot tall on a little tripod. So it was upstairs when we got there, and there were all the TAPS people, you know, smiling. So we were just egging her on the whole time, like, hey, this is where the TAPS people got this reading. And like, we'd take photos, and she was like, not happy. Well, I had to leave. I got a beep on my phone. I had to leave. And there was only about 10 minutes left. She was a good sport. She took a picture with my crew in front of that TAPS poster, which I have today. But I wanted to prank them. So they were all upstairs. I went downstairs, and there was a big table in the kitchen because this used to be a home. So I took all her stuff, including her little docent book, and she had an assistant, and he had stuff. Well, everybody who left stuff on the table, I moved it all around. I switched it so it would look like something had messed with their stuff. So I'm back, and I had a meeting. I can't remember with who. So I get back in my office. My staff comes back, and they're like, you're not going to believe this. I go, what? She goes, we get down there, and the docent goes, who was moving my book? So it was a paranormal, not so paranormal. I just couldn't stand her attitude, and hopefully I corrected it.
Yeah, man, that's funny.
I pranked her.
Yeah, that was a good one. Let's get into some of your investigations into UFOs and extraterrestrials. Talk about some of your more profound investigations when it comes to people's abduction experiences.
Well, the second book is Alien Shades of Grays, Victoria's Secret Truth. And the woman's name is Victoria. And she really kept that story close to herself, so Victoria's Secret Truth, or her secret life, so to speak. She's mid-50s, very attractive, very intelligent. She has multiple degrees from the University of Colorado, speaks, reads, writes Russian. She had a business in Russia for a while, did international studies. And she is one of, if you believe the researchers who do this for a living, especially the people who do therapeutic hypnotic regressions, they know thousands of people. So Victoria's story is really only one of thousands that are out there. But the reason that I wrote her story, it happened really strangely, as most things do. I was at my very first UFO conference, and Victoria sat down next to me with her then boyfriend, a guy by the name of Glenn. And when the first speaker was done, they introduced themselves, and Glenn tells me, well, Victoria, my girlfriend, is an experiencer. She's had contact with entities she doesn't really know what they are. Now you can imagine, this is my first conference. What are the odds of me sitting next to a couple and a guy saying, my girlfriend is an experiencer, and by the way, we believe that she has hybrid children. You could have knocked me over with a laser beam. So that was kind of like this adrenaline jumpstart, and they seemed like really genuine people, and I would see them throughout the conference for the week. This is in the Phoenix area. It was Fountain Hills is where the International UFO Congress was. It was my very first one, and so that was going through the back of my head, and I would meet them again like in the expo hall, and I was always thinking, are they pulling my leg? And then as the week went on and I heard like people like Barbara Lamb giving talks about abductions, and I met people who were experiencers and sharing their stories, I really got intrigued by this. So, I didn't become like infatuated with it or anything, but it really pushed that kind of thing to the forefront of my thinking. So, over the next couple of conferences, I would see Victoria and talk with her and her boyfriend or her friends. Well, in 2016, I think that was 2016 or 17, I was at the conference and I was selling my book at the expo. She came up to the table, we talked, and socialized a little bit, but the conference was over, maybe it was 16, and I went to the casino that was next door. And, sometimes your inner voice just tells you, go there, do that, talk to that person. So I went into the casino, and I'm kind of allergic to smoke, and it's filled with tobacco smoke, but something told me, go to where the blackjack tables are, which means I had to walk through the entire casino. And when I got there, who was playing blackjack? Victoria. So she wasn't with her boyfriend. I went up, started talking to her, and I said, can you tell me more about your experiences? The conference is over, my flight's out the next day, most of the people are gone, but I was still kind of jazzed about this thing. So she said, well, I don't really have a story, but I got a lot of random stories. She started telling me about as an adult and this event when she was a student. And I'd learned enough over a couple of conferences where I kind of developed this this sense of, I really think your stories amount to something concrete. I'd like to know more. So it took me a year. I'd already written half of my second book by then, but I thought if I could get her to confide in me, and then, I could write this great story, this really intimate story of what it's like. And that's how I came to get her as my subject. It was a long route. It took me a year to convince her to write her story.
Now, what can you tell us, if anything at all, about any of her experiences? Possibly, what kind of beings she encountered? Were they positive experiences?
Those are great questions. She can go back and remember when she was a child in her room living just north of Cincinnati. And she remembers these ant people. And I'll hold my hands up so your viewers can see. There was an activity like this. It looked like they were pulling string through their fingers, and they were weaving it around her ceiling. And she always remembered them as being very small. She called them the ant people. Well, skipping forward now to her first regression with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, she comes to find out that she is seeing these ant people, but now they're bigger, and she describes them as insectoids. She also describes encountering iridescent insectoids wearing hooded robes, like Jesuit collars around it. And she's come to the determination, talking to Dr. Sprinkle, that perhaps as a child, her memories of ant people, she was still seeing the insectoids, but the screen memory made it more palatable that they were small, tiny ants because they weren't as scary. But it was really a large creature, because she goes, and even in the regression, she said, they look exactly the same, but they're bigger. And, that tends for me to believe that they really are the same people, but it was a memory that they gave you. Or it could be a self-imposed memory where you didn't want to remember it as a big 6-foot ant or insectoid. You want to remember it as something, that you see every day while you're out playing. My nose is itching, sorry. So she has seen iridescent insectoids, mantises, grays, those little ant people. And she recalls different entities at different parts of her life. Some are very consistent. She says, while she's laying on the table, she's recounting laying on the table and there's a procedure being performed. The guy says, the entity said, you're back. Again, we're not going to hurt you. And let me just touch upon this good, bad kind of alien. She's telling them on the regression, I'm not afraid. I know you have to do this. They're telling me they have to do this. It's going to benefit us. They're not going to hurt me. But during one of the regressions, she goes, that kind of pinched or whatever. Now, there is evidence. I'm not going to say proof, and I'm going to qualify this to the umpteenth so we're perfectly clear, because people want to know what goes on. In regression, she says things like, they're taking my eggs. They tell me they're taking my eggs. So that is a fact. They're taking my eggs. She says this. And she says, they tell her, we're removing some eggs. Now, I suspect, though Victoria has never said this, and I do not have the proof for this, I have some evidence. So again, I'm going to qualify this. My personal opinion is that they planted embryos for her to gestate for a certain period of time, and then they were removed. Now, what leads me to this conclusion? Again, this is my personal take. There were regressions when she's talking about procedures and there's no mention of them taking eggs. And in some of these procedures, where they're not taking eggs, there was a little, she called it a spatula with a little flat blade, very narrow to it. And when I looked up abortions, that is a type of instrument that was used during an abortion procedure. Now, it's a physical entity, and if you're not God, you're not going to float that out. You physically have to remove that physical embryo. Now, she's talking about that they're doing a procedure on me and it's pinching and I feel it, but she's not mentioning the removal of eggs, yet she's describing an instrument that looks exactly like something that would be used by an abortionist. Now, you don't have to be a mathematician here to add 2 and 2. So again, this is my personal feeling. To get the evidence, I think you'd have to have some medical procedure, something with, it's scoped out, or however they can do it with I'm trying to think of the words, it'll come to me, but they can scope it without being intrusive. Or they may be MRI or X-ray. So if you really wanted to get evidence to prove my theory, I think you'd have to go deeper, as it were. Fiber optics, that's the word I was thinking about. Get a little fiber optic scope in there. Maybe look for scarring in a uterus, or, they could do it outside the uterus. But I firmly believe, because that is consistent with what the real experts who have done thousands of interviews, that's what they say. And I believe that based on the evidence I've been able to uncover, I think she's had that kind of experience.
Now that's so fascinating, because I've interviewed plenty of contactees and abductees who have recalled something about a procedure and possibly meeting hybrid children. I have had a lot of interviews that have had the theme of having some sort of hybrid children or procedure done with eggs or removing eggs or sperm. Do you think that there is some sort of hybridization or DNA or some kind of ongoing program with these extraterrestrials?
No doubt in my mind. If you look at the literature and you talk to the people, Victoria had 4 regressions. 2 by Dr. Sprinkle, 1 by Yvonne Smith, and 1 by Barbara Lamb. If you do your research, there are 4 of the preeminent hypnotherapists who do this type of work with experiencers. I'm guessing, and I'm going to be short, I would say in their lifetimes collectively, there's probably 9 or 10,000 people they've worked with, or 9 or 10,000 regressions they've done. I think that would be a fairer thing, because some people might be regressed 10 times. Be that as it may, those people, and add Dr. Jacobs, John Mack, Bud Hopkins, read their books. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands. Victoria's experience is very consistent. When she was first abducted, the length of time, the procedures, the memories. It's so consistent with all these other stories. Yeah, there's minor things that are different, but in fact, Victoria is quoted, and I did write this in the book, because I put a lot of her regression testimony, which was either videoed or audio taped. I put a lot of that in Victoria's Secret Truth, because I wanted people to see the hard-hitting evidence that she was providing with the assistance of these world-class hypnotherapists. She says, I believe, I think it happened while she was talking to one of them after she was brought out of the trance. She said, I firmly believe I'm part of a hybridization program. It's very consistent with all these other world-class experts.
Now, something else that is a common theme with abductees or contactees is these insectoids. But not only that, it always seems that they're in some kind of authority position or in charge of something, or a scientist. And these little grays seem to be like little biological robots or AI or something. And it seems to be that dynamic, or there's a reptilian in charge or something like that. Is that something you come across?
Exactly. That's from the testimony of Victoria directly. And of course, all these other world-class researchers have also noted that. But there does seem like to be a hierarchy. If there's only insectoids and grays, the insectoid's in charge. If there's a reptilian, he's in charge. Subservient to him is the insectoid. And then, like you said, those biological robot types that always seem to be hovering, almost like, physician's assistants and the people who assist in surgery. Not to degrade physician's assistant, because, they've sewn me up more times than not. So all you PAs out there, I love you. But again, they do seem to be subservient to the hierarchy that has been put in place there.
Oh, sorry, my mic went out for a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, right now I can, yeah.
Okay, very good. Now, that's fascinating that they have this hierarchy. And something else that it seems that, like I just mentioned, these grays, they seem like little biological robots from a lot of the descriptions. But they also have descriptions of taller grays that seem more conscious and emotional. Have you heard the description of the taller grays and the different types like that?
I've not heard the difference. I've heard the description. I don't recall Victoria per se mentioning specifically if her grays were tall or short. Generally, they're like in, the 4.5 foot tall thing, or, her recollection is like, I was laying on the bed and they weren't much taller than, where I was laying on. So you would assume, what's the normal height of a gurney or a operating table? It's what, 3.5, 4 foot tall. So very consistent with those small robotic grays.
Now, I also understand that you have done some investigations and you actually got to hang out with Travis Walton and see the actual area where the whole phenomenon took place, right?
Would you like the Reader's Digest version or the whole how cool it happened?
Well, whatever you feel like telling us, I'd love to hear the story, though.
Okay, great. So it was at one of the UFO conferences, and Jennifer Stein did a movie with Travis Walton called Travis Walton. And I got invited to her table at dinner. She just attracts people. She's just such a wonderful person. So I was sitting 3 or 4 people down from her, and unbeknownst to me, on her right was Travis Walton, because they had just wrapped the movie. In fact, at that UFO Congress, they were showing the movie before it got released to theaters. And after the dinner was over, people were kind of dispersed in that dining room. And I told her that after the conference was over, I had enough material that I think I knew how to find Travis Walton's site, the site of his event, and that I was just going to go do some research up there. Well, she asked me what kind of research. I go, well, I know that there's some trees cut, and I want to look to see how I understand that these trees are growing exponentially larger in the direction of where that UFO was hovering, almost as if that side of the tree got irradiated, and the tree was just growing faster due to that irradiation. And I had a professional camera, so I said, I'm going to take these photos. And she said, well, maybe we can help each other. And I said, how's that? She said, well, when we were up there, we failed to take still photos of those trees that were cut and of the growth, of the unusual growth. If you go up there and shoot the photographs, I can find a person who will take you exactly to the site where those trees are, and the Travis Walton site, and you won't have to guess at it. And I thought, oh my God, the heavens have opened up. How lucky am I that somebody that knew her, knew Jen, invited me to the dinner table, and then I got to sit with them, and now she's going to find somebody to take me to the site. So I go, well, great. Who you can get to help me? She goes, Travis, get over here. I go, what? So Travis comes on over. She goes, Travis, do you know Ray? He goes, no. And so this must have been 2015. So she makes the introduction. She said, now, Travis, next week, Tuesday, which was like everyone was leaving the conference by Monday because it ended on Sunday. She goes, Tuesday, I want you to meet Ray at his hotel. He's going to drive you to your site, and he's going to take photographs of those tree trunks. The trees have been cut down, and any other photos you think should be in the movie. So I'm like, you are kidding me. Jen goes, she tells him, you will show up, Travis. And then they laugh at each other because there must have been some ongoing thing, with them shooting the movie together. So I get up there Monday night. I'm in a hotel in Heber, Arizona. One-horse town. Freaking one-horse town. So I'm in the Best Western or something. And Travis gave me his phone number. Now it's snowing up there, but it's clear down in Fountain Hills. About a 2-hour drive. I called Travis, and he goes, man, not sure I can make it. Well, I start to freak. I go, why not? He goes, well, it's a 2-hour drive, and I understand it's snowing up there. Well, it is snowing, but I knew it was going to end within the hour, and by the time he got up there, it would be gone and melted. I said, Travis, I'm seeing the front go through. I'm lying through my teeth. Travis, the front's going through, man, and there's 6 inches of snow coming down on the hood of my 4x4. I said, it'll be gone by the time you get up there. So he goes, call me back in a half hour. So I call him back, and he still hesitant. I said, Travis, this is the only time I'm going to be up here. Jen's got a deadline. I don't think either of us want to let her down. We don't want to be in the bad end of that. So he shows up later in the afternoon, maybe, I don't know, 2 o'clock. We jump in my 4x4, and I got Travis Walton in my 4x4, 3 inches of mud going up the mountain, slipping and sliding. Well, he didn't know I grew up in Detroit, so I'm used to driving on snow. And this is mud in the snow, the same thing. So he's holding on. We get partway up there, we see a herd of wild horses in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. And I go, hey, Travis, you want to go check the horses out? I didn't even have the car stopped. He was unbuttoning his seatbelt, and the door was open. He was going to go check out the wild horses. So we go check out the wild horses. You know, I took some photos. I put one of them in the book. But as he's heading out, I'm thinking to myself, and if your listeners know the story of how Travis Walton got abducted, he left the truck he was in and then got abducted. So he's jumping out of my 4x4, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, Travis, the last time you jumped out of a truck in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, it didn't work out so good. But there he was, man. And so he wants to get close to the herd, and I've got a 300 millimeter lens. And I kept going, get closer, Travis. And I was trying to go for like the shot where the horse might charge him, thinking, I've got a 50-yard head start on him, and I don't have to outrun the horse. I only have to outrun Travis. So we took some photos. We went up there. We went to the site. I have my tripod, so I had to get a buddy picture. And one of the last things I did, because he was getting cold, because I was in good stuff, he was in like business attire, is I got my tripod out and I got a couple of buddy pictures up there on the site over which the UFO hovered. He showed me all the tree stumps that I was supposed to photograph. I took that. But the coolest thing, at one point, the sun was going down. It was getting up to be like the same kind of light that it was the day they were up there when he got abducted. And so he just starts talking. He said, well, you know, over there is where we were in the truck, and we were coming from over there, and we're coming down this road. And he goes, we're looking in this direction, and we see this light, and we think that maybe the forest is on fire. And he tells me, second by second, minute by minute, as we're standing on the site, about the car coming down and where it stopped and how he got out. And there was a pile of slash there, and he got there, and he came. And so I had Travis Walton on this very chilly February afternoon, almost sunset, telling me the story of how it happened, like a religious experience.
Now, I'm sure most of my audience knows the real story that, when you watch the movie Fire in the Sky, you get the wrong idea about what happened, that it was a malevolent experience. But what there actually happened is these beings saved his life. And, I'm sure a lot of my audience is familiar, but for those that may not be, talk a little bit about, what the difference is between how it was portrayed and what really happened to Travis.
In the movie, it's a Hollywoodization, Fire in the Sky. And Jim Garner, who played the sheriff, I actually got to meet Jim Garner at the Bel Air Country Club in Los Angeles one time. A friend of mine sponsored me in to play golf, and we were coming up the elevator. He was getting ready to step on, and my friend introduced him to me. So big thrill. And then later, or before, whenever Fire in the Sky was filmed, he turns out to be the sheriff. So Fire in the Sky was a Hollywoodization. And a lot of things are smooshed together. Like the James Garner character, sheriff, was like 5 law people all smooshed together because he did what all they did, in their investigations. What really happened is when Travis got out of the truck, he ran to this pile. They call it slash. It's trees they cut down that they're eventually going to remove. And when he stood up, he'd seen enough. He stood up. There was an electromagnetic discharge from the craft, and it hit him, picked him up 10 feet, blew him 10 foot back, and they thought he was dead. So the guys fled, who were driving the truck, and the other 5 guys in the truck, they fled. But half hour later, they show up, and Travis is gone. So Travis was on the ship for 5 days. They let him out not too far from this gas station. And this gas station had telephones. And I think it was about a 15, 20-minute walk. So Travis makes his way there, hits the receiver. Back then, you could make a phone call or get the operator with no money, contacts a relative, and they come pick him up. But he was gone for 5 days. Early on, he's trying to come to grips with everything that's happening. And he thinks that it was a weapon that got him. But as time goes on, he realizes that they took him not to abduct him and do harm, but he was burned over 90% of his body, and that they took him on board to heal him, and he realized that's what was happening. So the Hollywood version shows him fighting and breaking out of this web, and again, that's really, really Hollywood, but in real life, he's come to healing him, and it wasn't malevolent. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Very good. Now, to close out tonight, I'd like to get your thoughts on what's been happening the past couple of years with this mainstream talk about UFOs, the Pentagon leaks and the videos and all these things that are coming out now. Do you think it's a sort of slow drip disclosure or something else? Do you think we'll ever see disclosure come from our own government?
Well, I think the videos came from our own government, but secondhand, and they were put in a position where they couldn't do anything but admit to it. Like, okay, we got it out. We're not hiding it. These looked official. We don't know what they are. We don't know what they are. But yeah, what happened in this case was too many high caliber witnesses. You had Rendlesham Forest in 1980 where all of these guys saw stuff and they were able to brush it under the table because only a handful of people got within touching distance, like Jim Peniston, of that craft. Here you had an entire carrier group, including these pilots, radar people, up-close pilots, the people on the deck, the people who were looking at the radar. You had hundreds of people that were first-person witnesses to this, and they said, look, we know you got this thing about telling the truth, but you're going to have a revolution on your hands on these highly sophisticated, highly trained pilots who are going to say, unless you admit that something's out there and we can avoid them or do whatever, we're not going back. And it was the pilots that put the pressure on. And then, of course, it got leaked because you had some high-powered people. You had a guy that was former Undersecretary of Defense, be part of this ATIP thing. So I think the government handled it the right way. And they just said, yeah, there was anomalous stuff. Yeah, the pilot saw it. Because you can't take a whole nuclear carrier and say those people are full of crap, because that's going to blow back on you. You can't do that. So I think they did the right thing, but I don't think they're going to go, yeah, that Roswell thing, that was nothing. So I think it's good, but isn't it interesting how the COVID-19 thing hit and that went off the front pages?
Right. Yeah. No, it was a little blip for a couple of months back. It came back for a little bit, but now it's gone again.
So my take on it is, I was a little bit skeptical at first, simply because, I thought that, to the Stars Academy, my first thought was they were on a fundraising mission and that it was more hype. And in my years, I've seen a lot of hype, and I thought, I'm just going to take a wait and see attitude. And I told all the people who asked me, because, I'm kind of like a local expert on this, and I would just say, I don't know. I don't have enough evidence. I've never researched it. I'm doing something else now. Well, if I get a chance to look into it, and I'll try to get closer to the truth. And then as things came out, I got more and more confident. Those same commanders came out and those same pilots came out. They were very consistent. And then in March of last year, I gave a talk at the UFO mega conference in Laughlin, Nevada. And I got to sit down with 6 of those people who were on that boat. So now we're in a bar, we're having a beer, and I'm sitting with them going, now I've got first person. And I could ask them what was going on, and I sat through their talks and their panel session and everything. And it's just one-on-one, non-attribution, and you get to look somebody in the eye, and you hear the timbre in their voice, and I'm convinced that they saw what they saw.
Very good.
Yeah. So for me, it's a confirmation.
Yeah. I mean, it's confirmation for most people. Most people who are looking into this already know it's real. It's just these little bits of further confirmation, or it's pretty exciting. I'm just not sure that it'll come from our government. It'll probably come more from researchers and people like yourself that are out there doing the work. Now, you said you have another book in the works, right?
I do.
Well, can you give us a little preview about that before you take off?
All right, I'm going to be very nebulous about it, but there have been major stories that the government has denied the existence of UFOs. And in some cases, the observations were on the ground. In many cases, there were pilots chasing UFOs, but they were silenced. They were told, you can't say this. And there are many, many famous cases. The government came out and said it was a hot air balloon, or it was dancing Venus, or it was swamp gas, or it was whatever. Well, just by being in the right place at the right time, I met somebody in the military who was a first-person witness to a very famous UFO case that involved the government but was denied by the government. This individual is now very, 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 very old. And before they go to the other side, they decided they wanted to tell somebody their story, and they have the documentation to back it up. That individual, I have the interviews with them over the course of many days and many hours. And the final book in my trilogy is going to rewrite a portion of UFO history, and I will have the audio video to prove it, and I will have the paperwork to prove that this individual was part of what he claims to be part of. And I'm working it feverishly, but I would say we could probably look for that book maybe next January, February at the latest. So that much I can give you. It is going to correct part of UFO history, which unfortunately, and for whatever reason, was not given properly by government sources.
Wow, that's going to be amazing. Looking forward to that. And we'll definitely have to have you back on soon, too. Raymond,
Terrific.
thank you so much for coming on. That was awesome information. Everybody go pick up 50 Shades of Gray's Victoria's Secret, and we don't have a title for the third one, right?
It's going to be part of the Alien Shades of Gray's trilogy, because that's what it's been renamed. Alien Shades of Gray's. Alien Shades of Gray's. I have a title, but I'm going to spring it on everybody. My principal subject and I, every time I tell him the title, it makes him laugh. So I know it's a good title because he's a super serious guy. He's a high profile, highly awarded individual with a pedigree that is the pedigree is unassailable. So and he's a serious dude. So if I can make him laugh, I know I'm on the I can make the audience laugh, and I can make the book buyers laugh too. I think they're going to like it.
Awesome. We're looking forward to it. Raymond, thank you so much again, and we will hopefully talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to another trip. It was a great interview. Appreciate it.